If you told me a few years ago that a spoiled HOA princess stealing my ATV in broad daylight would end with federal agents swarming my neighborhood park and a drug cartel getting ripped open by spreadsheets and birdhouses, I would have laughed, taken another sip of coffee, and gone back to sanding cedar in my garage. But that was before the morning I pulled into my own driveway and watched a 19-year-old girl hook up the last thing my wife ever gave me like it was trash left on the curb. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, the words coming out raw before my brain could catch up. Lily Carter, daughter of our beloved HOA president, barely glanced over her shoulder, bleach blonde hair catching the Texas sun, a smirk already loaded on her face as she snapped the chain tighter around my ATV and said, almost lazily, "Relax, old man. My mom runs this neighborhood. I'm untouchable." That ATV wasn't just a toy. It was the last real piece of Emily, my wife. Gone from cancer, but still alive in every scratch on that 2019 Polaris, the one she surprised me with on our 25th anniversary, hands shaking from chemo, but eyes stubborn and bright, as she put the keys in my palm and told me, in that voice that never took no for an answer, "Promise me you'll keep riding those trails. Promise me you won't stop living just because I have to go." My name is Daniel Ross, 52, electrician by trade, widower by bad luck, and reluctant main character in a story that started when we moved to Maple Ridge Meadows. This tidy little HOA outside Maple Ridge, Texas, the kind of place with brochures full of smiling kids and strong community values, the kind of place Emily thought would give us peace, space, and neighbors who'd actually say hello instead of hiding behind 6-foot fences. On paper, it looked perfect. 47 homes, dues at $180 a month, big backyards, a community pool, a park with picnic tables under the oaks, but the brochure left out one tiny detail, and her name was Elaine Carter, 49, surgically precise manicure, tennis skirts more expensive than my truck, an oversized designer purse she carried like a crown, and a grip on the HOA presidency so tight it strangled the whole neighborhood. From the day I met her, standing in my driveway telling me where I could and couldn't put my trash cans, I knew exactly what she was, that special breed of HOA royalty who doesn't protect property values as much as she weaponizes them, handing out violation notices like party favors, adjusting rules whenever someone annoyed her, all while her husband Thomas, pharmaceutical consultant, flew back and forth to Mexico on business trips that somehow never left a paper trail anyone could explain. The first shot she fired at me was a bright yellow citation taped to my front door. Unauthorized recreational vehicle storage, $200 fine, and I stood there on my own porch, looking at my ATV parked exactly where it had sat since move-in day, in my driveway, paid for, registered, insured, and suddenly declared illegal not because any rule said so, but because Elaine woke up one morning and decided she didn't like it. At the HOA meeting that night, under buzzing fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial cleaner, I raised my hand, held up the original covenants, and told her, calmly, that there wasn't a single word in there about ATVs, that she couldn't just invent rules out of thin air because my driveway offended her sense of order. And the room went so quiet I could hear the air conditioner rattle as 15 of my neighbors stared at the floor like abused dogs, already trained not to make eye contact. When the Queen was speaking, "Rules evolve, Mr. Ross," she said, smiling with her mouth, not her eyes, voice turning from honey to steel in half a second. "We maintain standards through adaptive governance. And if you can't keep up, perhaps Maple Ridge Meadows isn't the right fit for you." And in that moment, with Arthur Lynn in the back scribbling in his notebook and Monica Rivera, the ex-treasurer, shaking her head like she'd seen this movie before, I made a quiet promise. I wasn't moving that ATV, not an inch. 2 weeks later, that promise is what I drove up on. Lily in my driveway, her boyfriend's beat-up pickup backed in, trailer hitched, chain wrapped tight around Emily's ATV, the metallic clank echoing down the cul-de-sac as my board slid forward in the truck bed when I stomped the brakes and yelled for her to stop, to unhook it, to act like she understood something about ownership and grief and basic human decency. Instead, she laughed, said her mom already cleared it with Officer Blake Turner, said she was just helping me comply with community standards, while her skinny, tattooed boyfriend never looked up from his phone, the gun-shaped bulge under his jacket telling me exactly how serious they were about this little rule enforcement. I called 911 anyway, Stood in my driveway for 45 minutes watching them drag my wife's last gift down the street, while neighbors peeked from behind curtains like reality TV spectators. And when Officer Turner finally pulled up, took his time getting out, and treated it like a property dispute instead of theft, when Elaine rolled in with fake paperwork and cheap perfume. When she pointed to a crack in the sidewalk and told me everything past that line belonged to the HOA, I knew this wasn't just about an ATV, it was a message: fall in line, or we will crush you. What she didn't know was that grief had already done its worst, and there wasn't much left in me she could scare. The campaign that followed was so precise it felt scheduled. Fines dropping like clockwork, grass height, mailbox color, excessive noise at 2 in the afternoon, each notice more ridiculous than the last, each signature that same careful cursive, like Elaine was autographing her own downfall. And while my neighbors shook their heads and whispered, "Just pay it. It's easier," I started doing the one thing bullies hate most: documenting. Photos, timestamps, copies of every notice, every email, every drive-by, with her telephoto lens snapping pictures of my yard like I was running a cartel lab instead of building birdhouses. All of it went into a folder on my workbench, and that's when Arthur shuffled over with his mug of green tea and quiet fury and told me, almost casually, that the city code capped those fines at a fraction of what she was charging, that she was making up numbers like a casino house that never loses. Then Monica knocked on my door with a manila envelope full of photocopied financials she'd taken before she quit as treasurer, pages of bloated pool contracts, fake security invoices, administrative fees with no explanation, all flowing to Carter Property Services LLC and a handful of other companies that smelled wrong even before Arthur and I sat down in his dining room and turned that house into a forensic crime lab. We followed the money like electricians follow bad wiring, from our dues to inflated contracts, from those contracts to shell companies, from those companies to Silvercrest Therapeutics, Thomas Carter's pharmaceutical consulting firm, and from there, straight into a pattern of deposits that lined up perfectly with his conferences in Mexico. And the more we traced, the clearer it got. This wasn't some petty HOA scam. This was a laundering operation. The confirmation came from the dumbest place. Lily's boyfriend, Tyler, pulled over with fentanyl and $14,000 in cash in his trunk, suddenly transformed into the world's most cooperative witness when faced with federal time, telling investigators about product coming through shady clinics, about Thomas handling money cleaning through safe accounts, about big chunks of cash that just disappeared into something called the HOA. That's when I stopped talking to local cops and started talking to Agent Sofia Alvarez at the DEA, meeting her in a downtown coffee shop with my folders, Arthur's color-coded spreadsheets, Monica's photocopies, my videos, my notes, all of it spread across a table sticky with old sugar, and I watched her face go from polite interest to sharp focus to quiet, controlled anger as she realized exactly what our little neighborhood association had become. "This is the inside documentation we've been missing," she said, tapping a line of transactions with her pen. "We've had Thomas on our radar, but we couldn't see how he was moving the cash, and you, Mr. Ross, just showed us his laundry machine." From that moment, my home stopped being just a house and became the edge of a battlefield. Alvarez installed a panic button on my phone, quietly relocated my daughters out of town, parked federal marshals within shouting distance, and turned my dining room into mission control, laptops humming, evidence boards going up, my coffee maker working overtime as Natalie, A.R. Thursday's daughter, built a financial timeline that showed more than $2 million washed through our HOA in 3 years. From the street, Maple Ridge Meadows still looked exactly the same. Sprinklers ticking across lawns, kids on bikes, Elaine's white SUV cruising by like a shark, the fake Maple Ridge watch truck idling at the curb. But under that pretty surface, wires were sparking. Intercepted texts mentioned ELF in Mexico, heat in Texas, extraction before Sunday. And when Elaine panicked enough to call an emergency HOA meeting to propose banning security cameras, when the vote turned against her because people she thought she owned finally smelled blood, when Thomas rushed home and tried to move money faster than the feds could type, the timeline on his freedom shrank to hours. He tried to run, private jet, duffel bag full of cash, fake passport. DEA agents tackled him on the tarmac, and suddenly the untouchable Carter family was down to 2 scared women and a neighborhood barbecue they didn't know was about to become a live broadcast execution of their empire. The morning of the Maple Ridge Meadows summer barbecue, the heat was already sitting heavy on the grass when I woke up to find Agent Alvarez in my kitchen in tactical pants, sipping coffee like this was any other Sunday, her vest hanging from my chair, her radio crackling with updates as undercover agents took positions around the park. Dog walkers, joggers, bored parents, all of them wired, all of them waiting. By 10, the setup looked exactly like every other year. Folding tables under the trees, grills smoking, kids chasing each other around the playground, local news vans parking near the curb for what they thought was some feel-good community unity segment. And in the middle of it all, Arthur clutching a folder with the final evidence packet and Monica Chain smoking behind the pavilion, both of them carrying years of fear and anger and the thin, bright thread of hope that today might actually change something. At 11:30, Elaine arrived in a flowing summer dress, oversized purse on her arm like a shield, doing her usual circuit of fake hugs and air kisses, the queen greeting her subjects, completely unaware that half the people she was flattering were federal agents waiting to put her in cuffs, and 20 minutes later Lily strutted in with her friends, sunglasses, attitude, moving through the crowd like a reality TV villain who hadn't read the script for the final episode. When Arthur stepped up to the microphone, his voice shook on the first word but steadied as he went on, telling our neighbors about financial irregularities, about inflated contracts, about money moving in ways it shouldn't. And when he said connected to drug trafficking operations using our HOA to launder millions, the chatter died, the grills hissed in the sudden silence, and Elaine's smile slid right off her face. That was Alvarez's cue. She walked out from behind the pavilion, badge gleaming, 30-plus agents fanning out behind her in a slow, deliberate wave, and when she called out, "Elaine Carter, Lily Carter, you're under arrest," the entire park seemed to inhale at once. Neighbors gripping paper plates, kids going quiet, local cameras zooming in as the myth of untouchable HOA royalty evaporated in the Texas sun. Elaine screamed about rights and harassment and her respected husband, and Alvarez calmly told her Thomas was already in federal custody on drug trafficking and money laundering charges, her words clearly enunciated for the microphones, while Lily tried to bark out that her family ran this place and didn't know who they were messing with, even as agents gently pinned her arms and snapped the cuffs shut with a sound that felt, to me, like justice finally exhaling. When Elaine, desperate and cornered, tried to spin it, pointing at me and accusing me of harassment over an illegal vehicle, Alvarez nodded me toward the mic, and I stepped up, heart pounding but weirdly calm, speaking not just for myself, but for every neighbor who'd ever written a check with their teeth clenched. "Your daughter stole my ATV," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "The last gift my wife ever gave me, and you thought you could scare me into silence with fake fines and made-up rules. But all you did was hand us the thread that unraveled your whole operation." And I turned to the crowd, to Mrs. Brooks wiping tears, to the Hendersons staring at the grass, to the people who'd lived scared for years, and told them exactly what Silvercrest and Carter Property Services really were, not services, not consulting, but pipes for cartel money running right under our front yards. They took Elaine and Lily away in front of everyone, past tables of coleslaw and potato salad and plastic cups, into SUVs lined up like a motorcade from another world. And as the doors closed and the sirens bled into the distance, the barbecue didn't end. It shifted, turned from a community event into something else, a wake for old fear, and a celebration that we'd finally buried it. 6 months later, I sit in my workshop on a cool October morning, coffee steaming next to a half-finished birdhouse, reading the final lines in news articles about Thomas doing 15 years, Elaine 8, Lily 3, their assets seized, their shell companies gutted, our dues cut almost in half under a new board with Arthur as treasurer and Monica as president, open books, quarterly audits, no more secret amendments pulled out of designer purses like magic tricks. The lot where the Carters' house once stood is now Emily's garden, a community plot full of tomatoes and peppers and flowers, kids running between raised beds while neighbors drink coffee and actually talk to each other. And every Saturday morning my ATV, the one they tried to steal, leads a small caravan of neighbors out to the trails, engines rumbling where fear used to sit. Laughter echoing down streets that used to go quiet when Elaine's SUV turned the corner. Here's what I know now. Sometimes a petty fine really is just a petty fine, but sometimes it's the camouflage on something much worse. Sometimes a stolen ATV is just a kid being stupid, but sometimes it's the loose thread on a money laundering empire. And sometimes the only thing standing between a quiet neighborhood and a cartel pipeline is one stubborn widower who decides he's had enough. So I'll leave you with this. If it were you, if your HOA president's daughter stole your property and told you she was untouchable, if the numbers in your neighborhood didn't add up, if the rules kept changing every time you got close to the truth, would you pay the fine and shut up? Or would you start asking questions, knowing that justice might cost you your peace, your safety, maybe even your life? And when you finally pulled the whole rotten thing into the light, would it feel like revenge, or like the bare minimum of what we owe each other when people with power decide the rules don't apply to them anymore?